are very excited to be collaborating on this very unique project. As some of you, has anyone seen it down there in person? Has walked by the beginnings? Yep. So we're happy to be collaborating on the fast forest, and we're glad that we have the space to be able to do it. So looking forward to hearing all that you have to share.
Thank you.
Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and thanks for coming.
So yes, thank you for coming. We also took the idea that you could do lots of things on the farm here and decided to plant a forest, because after all, who wouldn't want to plant a forest? I'm here to talk to you about the Winchester Forest Project. I'm Prassede Calabi. A few other members of the team are here. It's a project under Grow Local for the Planet, which is under the Winchester Farmers Market Community Hub. I have a degree in behavioral ecology, and behavior and ecology in particular is kind of my passion, vocation and avocation. And the way the group started, it's over 3 years ago, we got together to talk about regenerating soil and growing things. There was, you may remember, a mad rush for pollinator patches and habitat in general. And we, in particular, were looking at healing the earth was our motto, is still our motto. It turns out that one of the things we learned in doing this planting is that there are a lot of people who would like to plant and can't. They live in condos, they rent apartments, they don't have the money to do a garden, or they're 16 and their parents aren't very keen on them tearing up the lawn and replacing it. So one of the things that grew out of our 3 years was thinking that it would be wonderful to have a place where the community can plant. It's true we have a town forest, but this is very different in ways that you will come to see. So we're working on this particularly forest. New England used to be very foresty. It is, right, ecologically, evolutionarily has been very foresty. In particular, we know that in the last couple of decades, we've lost globally over a third of the forests, which is pretty terrible because forests do so much for us, I'll say, but for the planet, right? They act like lungs. They take up a lot of pollutants, including carbon dioxide. They regulate moisture, they regulate temperature, and for me, particularly passionately, they are habitat for a lot of critters. And to destroy those, we also destroy all the critters. And it turns out that people in general are quite concerned about this issue. We're not the only ones. So concerned that there is now terminology for it. Eco-grief and eco-anxiety are two of the terms that have been put forward. Eco-anxiety has become such a pervasive problem, particularly in younger people, that the American Psychiatry Association booted it to their top 5 concerns for this year. It's a real big problem. So one of the things that addresses pretty much all of these is planting forest, in particular, dense, mature, native forest. When I started this, I was fairly ambitious, and I put the colors here thinking I would color code the slides to each of these issues. Didn't happen, but you'll figure it out, I hope, from the process. So one of the interesting things about a forest is a food pyramid. You remember from 4th grade, the food pyramid, right? And you remember the base is the plant. And so a couple of interesting things. One of them is that there's now, we know, another base, an invisible base. We talk about the visible base is the plants, but the microbiome in the soil is, in fact, the base. Without the right microbiome, you really don't get the plants. And if you don't get the plants, you don't get the herbivores. And so you lose the whole chain. There's been a lot of science recently about microbiome. It turns out that every ecosystem has a signature microbiome, which means that everything, ants, birds, mice, plants, have the microbiome that is typical of that ecosystem. And you can do genetic testing of the microbiome and from 2 different places, and you can tell which species come from which place based on their microbiome. So it's a very core part of the whole system. And we do, in fact, account for it in the forest, but in terms of talking about the food pyramid, I'm going to focus on the plants. And we're going to talk about a very, very simplified food chain with chickadees as the predators, caterpillars as the herbivores, and plants will be playing the role of plants. So if you did not read the blurb for this evening's talk, I'm going to ask you what's happening here. Does anybody know? Want to take a guess? So go ahead. I heard it. Who said it?
Chickadee eating caterpillar.
Chickadee, in fact, being fed a caterpillar. So the begging bird, that's a typical begging posture, is a teenager. It has the full plumage, but it doesn't yet have the size of the adult. It's actually a very dangerous time for them because they're out of the nest, but they really don't fly well, and a lot of them get turned into lunch. In this case, however, it is being fed something, which I have this nifty pointer. Oh, damn. What is in the bill of that adult? What does that look like? It doesn't actually look much like, it's a caterpillar. So birds use a lot of caterpillars. In fact, I sometimes think this should be called the caterpillar forest, and you'll see why. So this is from nests at the Arnold Arboretum. They have cameras looking down into nest boxes. These babies have just hatched, no feathers. It's a little high contrast, but you can see them developing and growing over this time. At the last stage, they're actually pretty much what you saw begging with the full adult plumage. By day 16, they've gone out of the nest. So it's plus or minus, but basically by day 16. So they eat caterpillars. If you didn't read the blurb, do you want to make a guess how many caterpillars for a chickadee? People have guessed anywhere from 20 to 10,000, so I'll give you that as a range.
1,000.
Pretty much about 1,000. And that over the 30 days between when they hatch and when they're fully independent. So you might ask, why caterpillars? Well, have you ever seen a bird get fed, a baby bird get fed? It's kind of a rough business, right? The female just sort of, or whichever parent just kind of jams it down their throat. So one of the good things about caterpillars is that they're soft and they can go down a throat without causing a lot of damage. Being soft also means they don't have the hard coat of, say, a beetle, which is pretty undigestible and sort of a waste of stomach space and energy because there's no food coming out of that. They're very nutritious. They have a bunch of other things in them. In particular, you can read all of this. They have brights. You remember when your mom said, eat your brights? It's because brights have carotenoids, which is a set of molecules that all photosynthetic things have, some bacteria, photosynthetic bacteria, and all the rest of us need to eat it. We cannot make these. And they are the reason that we need to eat our brights. And they're a good reason that caterpillars are a good food source for birds. So what do carotenoids do? They are very strong immune support. They mop up radicals in the body. They're very powerful antioxidants. They photosynthesize. They're part of photosynthesis. Not that we use them for photosynthesis, but you know what I'm saying. And they provide color, structural color, and particularly obvious in birds. And these colors are very important for species recognition, for mate choice. In fact, brighter males of many bird species are preferentially chosen by females, and the brighter males are the ones who've eaten more carotenoids. So there's a very strong set of reasons behind this importance of carotenoids. So how important are carotenoids? So this is a little bit cut off, but you can see caterpillars and nymphs are larvae, what instar, the pupae. You can see are way on the left, very high carotenoids. All this other stuff, which is also out there and potentially edible, has almost no carotenoids. They also, to be honest, have more chitin. They're not as nutritious, and so it's not the only variable. I don't want to oversell it, but it's a really important one. How important is it for birds? It turns out, if you look at the green bars, each one of these graphs represents baby bird food in a different family of birds. Out of 20 families of birds, 16 of them, primary food of the babies is caterpillars. You're getting the impression, you're getting what I'm trying to say to you here. These are really very important. And if you think about 1,000 per baby chickadee and like say 4 to 6 per nest, and let's say 1, maybe 2 nests a year, and how many chickadees are out there, and that's just chickadees. And then you think of all the other 16 families of birds who are feeding their babies caterpillars. We're talking about a lot of caterpillars, and we need to feed those caterpillars, right? We need to have the plants that those caterpillars are going to eat. So there's a trick here. This is one of the key things of this entire talk. 70% of insects are herbivores. 90% of those are host specific. We all know the story of the monarch and the milkweed, right? It's been such an important part of our culture that we think it's very special. Well, it's not, in that there are so many other caterpillars that are similarly specialized. Maybe not on an individual plant species, but on a set of species, just like the monarch can eat several different kinds of milkweeds. What we have, and I won't point out the window here, but let's say downtown Winchester, all those plantings are not native. In other words, they are not plants with which these caterpillars have any ecological or evolutionary past, which means they can't feed these specialized herbivores, which means it's a food desert for them. So it's crucial that we replace all of these non-natives with natives so that we can get the pairings between the caterpillars and their plants so that all the things that eat caterpillars have enough caterpillars. If you garden, you know that native plant is a loaded term. People argue about how long has it been here, where did it come from, is it native, how do we know? The basic definition that I use is, does it naturally occur here? Has it been brought here by humans, or has it been here over time? There are some non-native plants that have some food value. I'm not going to say they don't, especially for nectar. But in terms of supporting the entire life cycle of these moths and butterflies, it has to be native plants. It also turns out there's another interesting reason we need such a diversity of plants. Many of these species, the larvae, eat different plants than the adults. And you probably know that butterflies have these, and moths have a long proboscis. They're nectar feeders. They don't actually eat plant tissue the way the larvae do, but so increasing the necessary diversity in order to get the full life cycle supported. Also, I want to show you, I love this slide because it shows the 5 different sizes of the larval instars, the caterpillars. They start, and of course the egg, which isn't on this slide, is even smaller than that. So there's a lot of plant biomass in these caterpillars at this time. If you've ever raised monarchs, you know that when they are hungry, get out of their way. They are just, it's the only thing they care about, and it's a very powerful drive because they have to put on all that biomass before they can actually pupate. So I can't resist. We need a joke at this point. So then here's a little aside. With all these numbers of caterpillars you're thinking about now, why are we not covered in caterpillars? You know, you feel like there should be caterpillars everywhere. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them is that a lot of them get eaten. We've just established that. The other is that they tend to drop down into the litter and the soil, which is where they do most of their development. It's also a really good argument against using bark mulch in your garden. It's non-native, it's usually dyed or chemically treated. Unlike leaf litter, it's very hard, it dries out, and it doesn't support these caterpillars. So every step along the way, we're trying to recreate the native conditions so that we can get back up to where we should be in terms of our insects. Okay, so here we are again, my color coding. We have talked about why we need species diversity. Also, more ecosystem function per square foot if we plant densely, which is what we're going to talk about. Time. So the claim that we have made is within 20 to 30 years, you're going to have a pretty functional forest here with this method of developing forests. That it's going to be like a 150-year-old mature native forest. I'm going to explain to you one of the ways that we save that time. If you've seen an open field somewhere and it's grassy and then a couple years later it gets shrubby and then there's some few woody trees sticking up and so on, this is called plant succession, and if you leave it alone, in 150 years you'll have a mature native forest. We don't have 150 years. What we need is to get these forests really fast with those species. So we cut out all these intermediate stages and we're only planting those species. When I say it, it sounds so simple, but people never thought of this until this gentleman came along. So a hero of mine, an absolute genius, Dr. Akira Miyawaki. He looked around, he was Japanese by origin and spent most of his life there. He said, we're losing forests, what can we do about it? He's a horticultural botanist. And he thought, oh, we can use mature forest species. He came up with this whole method and developed it with a bunch of people over the 70s. It has spread. In fact, in the last 5 years, I think there have been as many forests developed as there have been from the 70s up until 5 years ago. There are over 4,000 of them around the world now, from 1,000 square feet to 11 acres. The 11-acre one is in India. India has been a pioneer in this. They have developed an extraordinary amount of open access information and some DIY videos, phenomenal, ready, available for anybody who wants to plant one of these. There's also now an international organization which is talking about trying to be a clearinghouse for information and standardizing some of the techniques and helping people who want to do this. Dr. Miyawaki won a Blue Planet Award in 2006 for his efforts. This is the Indian company that I was talking about, A-Forest, and you can see some of the people they've worked with, zoos, schools, whatever. In this country, there's one in Cambridge, and the state of California has a bunch of supermoms who are doing them in 30 different schoolyards across the state of California to remove pavement and put in native forests. So it's quite the thing. When we started talking about it here in town, there was some ambivalence because it was new to many people. And in May, I think there was a front of the New York Times above the fold article about Miyawaki Forest, and suddenly it was like, oh yeah, we have one of those too. Yeah. So it was a very nice proof of concept for us. So the other things that he did that are so genius, I'm going to talk to you a little bit specifically about what makes a Miyawaki forest different from other forests. Perhaps because he is Asian, he looked at forests and he didn't say, oh, they're all competing with each other, isn't that too bad? He looked at forests and said, what are the bottlenecks that are keeping them from being the best, the most, the fastest growing that they could possibly be? And in their years of developing this, they came up with a couple of variables that make the difference between what you see happening on its own that takes 150 years and a supercharged forest. So the soil, obviously, right? We were talking about the microbiome. One of the variables is the microbiome itself. If you're in a very poor soil, you have to add microbiome. The other is the texture of the soil. If you garden, you know if it's too clayey, it doesn't work. If it's too sandy, it doesn't work. You want something that's a middle. And nutrients, so compost. You also plant really densely, 3 or 4 plants per square yard. You know that's nobody plants like that unless you're planting, perennials. But who puts woody plants down like that? Again, brilliant. You mulch it because you've got to keep that microbiome from drying out. You don't want it to freeze and dry in winter. You don't want it to dry too much in summer. So you have to give it protection from the top, and the plot has to be big enough so that the edges don't dry it all out. The minimum size that this works at is about 6 parking spaces worth, about 1,000 square feet. So we can have a ton of them around town. We have lots of places where we have 1,000 square feet that I can think of. Conservation Commission happened particularly to like this site here. It's a wetlands. It just made them feel more secure. I hope once we get this one going, maybe we'll have the energy and the oomph to do some others around town. So in the first couple of years, you have to weed it because there are things that will come up through the mulch. You put down like 5 inches or 6 inches or 8 inches of mulch. Does it work here? Yeah, this is Danahy Park. The one on the left is 8 months after planting. You see the 4-foot stake? There's not a single thing there that's over 4 feet. And in fact, When you plant them, they look like nothing. They look like like little broomsticks or big chopsticks. They look like nothing. The picture on the right is what it looks like 2 years later. So you can imagine that in 20 years, this is going to look pretty bodacious, right? It's going to be a forest. The trees are not going to be like a 150-year-old tree would be, but you have the diversity, you have the height, you have an amazing resource. So what about our forest? What are we doing? We have 5,000 square feet of wetlands. You go past the goats up the hill a little bit, and on the left side, you'll see a nice black field, an area where we cleared and where we put down some compost. And some of you here have helped. Sodbusters, thank you for your work. We're putting in 39 native species, 1,200 plants in 5,000 square feet. You wouldn't ever think of doing that, right? You'd think that it wouldn't work. Well, it does because of the supercharged soil. 16 tree species, 26 shrub species. It's a red maple swamp wetlands. And we're getting locally sourced plants so that we know they're genotypes that do well in this kind of an area. We're not getting them from South Carolina. They're local, very local. I like this expression, we want to maximize the species interactions. Everything I've been talking about is species interactions, right? Herbivores with their food, predators with their food, all the things that are going on in an environment. And in 1830, Humboldt, who was quite the naturalist, traveled around the world, very smart dude, talked about nature as being a collection of interactions and interacting species. And he said that losing any one species is much less damaging to the whole than if you lose interactions. I think he was onto something, and it's a key premise underlying the Milwaukee Forest method. But we have other ways of talking about the habitat value. As you can imagine, there's an algorithm by which you can assess the habitat value, how much food, nesting opportunities, places to mate and meet and have babies and raise babies is there in any given forest. The algorithm takes into consideration whether they're native species, what size they are, how many of them are relative to each other. Non-native species get a big fat 0, so they don't count at all. And you put this together and come up with the quality index for your site. When we started the site, before we started the clearing, it was mostly jewelweed and goldenrod, both native, both very good for bees. But in terms of their overall habitat value, the quality of that site was about 2. And people have said, well, there's other forests on Wright-Locke Farm. What makes this forest so special? Well, it is actually different. When you do this same habitat quality assessment of the other forests, it turns out they're somewhere between 12 and 14 because they're not mature native forests. They're somewhere along that path. They're not all the way at the mature forest end. The fast forest that we're planting, and the species list is on our website if you're curious what that is, has a habitat value of about 30. So we feel pretty confident that we're going to do what we want to do here in this site. If you haven't seen it, you got to go down there. The compost alone is gorgeous. It also has lime under it because the pH wasn't quite what we wanted. And between these two things, it's going to be pretty ready for planting in April. So we're still fundraising, I have to say. We've made a lot of progress. We invite you to join financially, if not otherwise. Your name or the name of anyone in whose honor you want to make a donation will be on our permanent donor sponsor list, which will be on the website of our website as well as the Wright-Locke Farm website, and we hope it will be there forever. The forest will certainly be there for hundreds of years. We're also inviting you to join us for the planting. This is obviously not us because we haven't planted yet, but it's pretty much of a party. There's a lot of plants. It's very active. You get to help whether you want to carry plants, whether you carry water, whether you're going to dig holes, whatever it is you're going to do. We have a sign-up sheet. And we hope, we have 200 people hour slots. And a lot of people will do more than 1 hour and more than one plant. So we hope you join us, even if you just come to look. We don't care if you don't do anything, but just come hang out with us. So summary, the benefits of the fast forest. I think you've gotten the habitat value. I think the creating community part is pretty important. The way I like to say it is it's 51% forest and 49% community. It has been amazing to us as a group, the response that we've had everywhere we talk about it with people. I think it's because it creates, here's another even newer phrase, climate hope instead of eco-anxiety. And you know, there's something about it. You're outside, you're with people, you're planting, you've got sun, you've got endorphins, and it's proactive. You can recycle and turn the lights off and do whatever you want, and you don't ever see it. I'm not going to oversell this and tell you this is going to change the global CO2 equation, because it's not, right? But we want a lot of them. We want them close together. We want more habitat. And we want it to be something that's going to be there for the next generations. We've kind of truked up the planet. And one of the things that resonated the most with the high school students when I was talking with them was when I said, we're doing this for you guys. It's going to be here for hundreds of years. And when you go off to college and you come home, it's going to be here and it's going to be bigger. And you're going to know that we did this for you. We really want this for you. So I think it's kind of a very big deal in all these ways. Here are people who are already active part of our community. Everyone who has donated. 8th grade Girl Scouts are preparing a curriculum for elementary school on fast forests. We have an Eagle Scout who's doing our planting day organization and raising money and a bake sale. Winchester High School students and the Environmental Club we have like 25 of them all signed up wanting to help. The Lincoln Green Team, First Congregational Church, they also made this the focus of their Blessing of the Animals service in October. The Episcopal Church, we have 3 research projects by peer-reviewed scientists. Everybody here, I don't know a lot of you, we would never have met if it wasn't for this talk, so it's working, right? There's more community. These are people to whom we owe special thanks for their participation so far. In this. I'll leave this up for a moment, particularly because there's some in the room, the Sodbusters. Thank you all. 9 Saturdays in a row, 9 to 12, 3 hours of digging and preparing the soil. That's a pretty big deal. I can see people coming once, but then you go, well, you know what? That's kind of a lot of work. These people came 9 times. And the heart of the fast forest, some of the team is here, some of them are not here. Thank you guys, it's been an amazing ride so far, and we're not finished yet. So we hope to see you all on the 20th, and I'm happy to take any questions, comments, disbelief. Thank you. Bruce.
Are there any examples in this area?
The Dennehy Park is in Cambridge on Sherman Street. If you go Sherman Street entrance in Cambridge, you walk in a few hundred yards, and on the right you see this exuberant green thing. Theirs is about 4,500 square feet. And that's the picture that I showed you. I can go back to the picture. That's their forest. And they do it, it's a public project. Unlike us, we're a 501c3. The DPW, and they have a fast forest person on their DPW staff, and they did a lot of partnering between volunteers and the DPW. I'm hoping we can get to that point also. That would be nice.
How many years is that from the first one to the second one?
This is 2 years. This is 8 months. 2 years. I don't know, if you garden, that's crazy. And that's because of the supercharged soil. It really works. Yes?
So, how fast can this forest grow beyond its original boundaries? Is it kind of slow because of...
So that's a really interesting question. In Cambridge, for example, they are having a big conversation over whether they're going to let this thing go into the green here or whether they're going to keep it enclosed. And I think the whole point would be for it to go and grow and, take off. And here we spent a lot of time taking out the invasives right across the road in the hopes that this would spread into the forest as opposed to the invasives spreading into our fast forest. So I don't know that. One of the interesting things about it is that a lot of these are not, they haven't been around for 20, 30 years yet, so we don't actually have a lot of information about that. It's one of the fun things about having an international organization would be, you'd like a website where everybody puts their data, and then you can find out more about that. I think it's a research project that I hope somebody takes on in the high school, and that it's one where the students every year go out and measure and see who's survived and who hasn't survived and how they're doing and stuff like that. And what's happening with the spread. Are they spreading? What species are particularly spreading, and so on. So I think that's a great question and can't wait for the answer.
See if I can detangle the questions. Having seen the Fast Forest site and understanding that there's been a great deal of work by the sawdusters up until this point, where is that in terms of the process? I see a classifier for the mulch or for the soils down there. Great machine, it looks like. The source of the soils, has that all been from that site, or has some been brought in?
We have not brought in soil. One of the nice things, again, the reason that we thank the DPW is because they've been supportive. In particular, we got a lot of compost from the transfer station. If you bring your own solid waste, you know that and it's very high quality compost, I have to say. People disparage it. I don't know why. So before I go off on compost, which is a favorite topic, the soil is there, has been there. It's been farmed off and on for several hundred years. And unfortunately, goldenrod roots are very tenacious, so we needed to kind of do some work on the goldenrod roots. Yes, we took those up. We haven't finished yet, but we made a big dent in them. We sent soil out from several different locations to UMass Extension. It came back as being somewhat low in nitrogen, but it's very acid, and we know that acid binds nitrogen, so we laid down, I want to say 1,300 pounds of lime, none of which is free, by the way. These things are all part of the cost of the forest, and then we covered it with the compost, which was free, which comes from the transfer station, and we're kind of letting that let these things get to know each other. We'll be plowing it in. We need to do more soil prep before we can plant in April, but it's been very wet there, as it has been everywhere, but there in particular, that pond has overflowed somewhat, and we ended up having to put silt socks down there, which was also an unexpected expense because it was so raining. Not having been able to plow it earlier, the permeability was not as good as it could have been. So, but that's all going to come. I mean, we have 2 months until the planting day, 2 months minus a week. We've been working pretty hard, and we'll keep it up until we get things into the ground. So that's what's happened there. It was not, one of the people on this project did 3 of them in Jordan the country, and they did them. Jordan has been inhabited and had agriculture for 10,000 years, and there are places where there have not been forests for 10,000 years, and they had to do a lot because that was hard pack and very depleted, including they had to bring in microbiome from, they had a big ethical conversation. Can we dig up a couple of cubic yards of soil from one of the few remaining forests in order to culture microbiome to put in this forest? So every step has decisions and costs and benefits. We didn't have to do that. The soil here is much better than that. So it's another reason that it's kind of a good site. My other dream site is on the high school grounds. There's all that flat area there that isn't being used for much. So anyway, other questions? Yes.
I was wondering if I could just speak quickly to the
Yeah.
farm side of it. Yeah, just for those of you who have questions about its location on the farm. So as Prassede mentioned, it's just beyond after our agricultural fields. So I think the screener you were talking about, that's actually our compost screener, but it is a helpful tool. But if you go beyond that, as if you're walking into the woods, it's on the left there. And that historically for us as the working farm, we have not been growing anything on there.
Right.
Historically, it was used for.
Sorry,
Yeah.
right.
there were some invasives growing there. You'd probably be better able to list some of the ones that you pulled out, but I think there was some multiflora rose and things like that.
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet coming in, yeah.
Yeah.
Some native weeds and things like that, but nothing that we were intentionally growing and nothing that we needed. And again, as was pointed out, there are a lot of, especially buckthorn, glossy buckthorn, things like that, that are spreading out into the woods if you continue into the trail. So it is kind of a hope of ours too that the native species will help to take over. So that is just to say that area was not being really used by us, and it wasn't a forest. It was just kind of weeds. Sometimes we would pick some flowers to make an addition to a flower arrangement, but it was really just a wetland. So for us, this is an opportunity. This project is typically done in a city where you can add a forest to a more of an urban setting. But we thought, how perfect, because sometimes we'll have people say, why plant a forest next to a forest? But hopefully, as you've learned, we really want to encourage the native species to come back. But also, what a great opportunity to just show the benefits of this method and to use it just as an educational sort of demonstration site. So that was kind of the reasoning on our side of it, is we have the space here that could be used and allow people to kind of learn and research and get the community together, which is what we're all about. So just wanted to...
And when I came to, Archie was still the director when I brought this project, and he was sitting here, Erica was sitting here, and I was kind of talking and kind of no read on them at all, and Erica looks at him and goes, I think it's perfect. So yes, it's been a wonderful source. It's also worth pointing out that reminding people that this 15 acres is a combination of conservancy land and farmland. So it fits in with both of those missions, right? Because it's got the community and all those things that are Wright-Locke Farm, and as an example, and also because it's habitat and conservation. So I had originally wanted to do one in my yard, which people do, and I thought, you know what? When you sell, the first thing the developer is going to do is cut the whole thing down. I needed somewhere where that's not going to happen. So that was kind of part of my purely selfish motivation for coming here. Other questions? Yeah.
So what are some of the species of trees and plants?
So
Shrubs?
there's, if you know the name Doug Tallamy, he is kind of the professor, Dr. Doug Tallamy is kind of the guru point person for planting habitat in yard. His idea is that we're gonna create 20 million acres of a national park, which is made up of everybody's backyards. And he has been very, very active in helping people figure out what species are the ones that support the most caterpillars, basically. He has a top 10 list, and our list, of course, came completely from that. Not that it was news to me. I do habitat restoration in forests around here. Another way, I gave this talk, or version of this talk, yesterday morning at Northeastern to a lab of people who study human environment interactions from the psychology point of view and what the issues are. And one of them said, well, but what good is the forest? You don't have paths through it, you don't have benches in it. I almost felt like there should be a bubblegum dispensing machine, whatever she was thinking. And I said, but you're wrong. There are all these benefits. It regulates temperature, it regulates moisture, it holds the soil in place, it minimizes the problems with runoff and with flooding and with a whole bunch of other things like that. I said, well, I didn't mean those benefits. Like, okay, but we went from it has no benefits from they're not ones you're thinking of. Well, you need to think of these because these are really important benefits. So yeah, and the temperature thing, I sometimes feel it in summer when you drive into Winchester from other places, you can feel the temperature drop. When you get into our tree area, it's a perceptible difference if you have your windows open. And we want to encourage everybody to do this. We're partnering with Charlestown through Turn It Around and hoping that we can help them plant one there where they have much less green and it's going to be even more noticeable effect. And if we keep putting them in, 6 parking spaces, every place there's 6 parking spaces, you can put one of these, right? I mean, we can do it. Somebody had I saw a hand, yes.
So can you plant the fast forests on steep slope sides, and if so, do you change the plantings depending on the topography and the rockiness of the soil?
Rockiness, of course, is going to affect things. So slope would affect it, but I think that actually it's only a short-term effect, because once those roots get in, they're going to actually hold the slope in place better than anything else. The place in Charlestown that I have my eye on, although they don't know this yet, is in fact quite slopey. And one reason that that's a benefit in this case is because people can't naysay by, oh, but you're taking away place, where kids want to play or where you can have picnics. You can't have a picnic if the slope is like that, but you can plant trees. You have to be a little careful when you're planting so you don't, fall down. But I don't think there's any intrinsic reason. I mean, the forest, New England is very like this, right? And there's forests all on the slopes all over New England. So there might be a logistical issue getting it going, but it's going to do very well, if that answers your question. Is that, yeah? Yes.
As I remember, there's a fence that's going to go around this, right? So how long do you think that fence will need to be there? And is the purpose the obvious one, to keep animals?
It's to keep rabbits out in particular. I was thinking deer, but according to the farmer here, the real problem, and the director, the problem is really rabbits more than deer. This forest, the fence is already gone. It was gone by like month 20 or something. They took it down. There was no point to it. And I'm sure the same will be true here. The trick is to get it up pretty close to when you plant, because you don't want all those plants to be eaten up. And small, yeah, I won't tell you. It's a secret. I can't tell you yet. but it's another expense, is we need $2,000 for the fence, and we're going to donate it to the farm afterwards, but the upfront cost is what the upfront cost is. So, and we may have a fence raising day where everybody comes and helps us pound stakes in, and what do they call them? The pins that you put to hold your mesh down into the ground. There are different lengths of them. I've used them to keep the rabbits out of my yard. You pound those in to hold the bottom of because rabbits will they go under, they go over. We've all read Mr. McGregor and the rabbits, yeah. Anything else? You want to go home? Yeah, David.
When it starts out, there's this great exaggerated density. And how long does it want to de-densify over time as things grow up?
Not as much as you'd think. I mean, one of the reasons that these they get more and more natural as time goes on, right? Because there then is competition, and some things will do better than other things, and some things might have a blight and so on, so that there will be some thinning out, but it's not as much as you would think it is. And it doesn't seem to be any detriment. It just does what it's going to do. And part of what makes it so great is that they're maintenance free. This one is in fact so dense at the moment that the person who's doing the insect biodiversity studies can hardly get through it. So and I think that it's also a bonus for a lot of animals because it protects them, so how it plays out in 20 years or 50 years or whatever is kind of like how any forest plays out. Some things die, some things will do well, other stuff might come in from outside. It's going to get more homogeneous relative to whatever else is around, right? Because stuff's going to come in. But we're hoping, obviously, that they're going to last 500 years. And given the species composition, at 500 years, it's not going to be exactly the same as it is now, for sure, because there's going to be replacement. But it's going to be there until we cut it down or until there's some mega disaster. But we're not talking about that. Yeah, one of the other projects is, what is the other project? Oh yeah, microbiome. We're comparing the microbiome in our fast forest, in the Cambridge fast forest, and there's a naturally developed red maple swamp wetlands forest in Woburn, so that's our third one. So we're doing that comparison to see what they look like. And if you do that, you got to do that. I mean, I just get so excited when I think about the data. If you do that like every couple of years and you keep doing that, that's amazing data. And a lot of the forests are not collecting any data at all. They're just being planted and then left but we're surrounded by all these researchy people. We should get them to, they like it, yes. And then last question maybe.
So are you replacing that red maple wetlands with an upland forest mix, or are you, I'm sorry, you keep talking about the wetlands and how part of it, like, are we enhancing that wetlands?
So we're restoring a degraded wetland site to a mature forest wetland site. It's not going to be bare. It's a bunch of species that can take very wet conditions, right? You don't want to plant things that are upland species because they're not going to do well there because it's really quite wet. So wetland is used two ways. One is as a legal designation and then just as a description, there's uplands, there's wetlands, and I'm sorry if I mix them both, it's confusing, but so you see what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, I was just concerned, most of the projects I've read about have been on barren land or wasteland,
Yep.
or something along that line.
Yep.
So when I heard you were doing wetlands, I was kind of like, well, are you enhancing the wetlands, or are you like replacing them, which worried me. So it's good to know that it's just an enhancement of what's.
It is what would end up there if we gave it 150 years. We're getting it jump started. Something you said, oh yeah, so in Cambridge, they actually built it on landfill, and they went down 2 feet, and according to people who've worked on it, including someone from our group, it was so they were practically in the garbage and they could smell it, and they had to put down a lot of soil, but we didn't have to do that. So that's more like what you're talking about. But you still have to pick species that are going to do well under those conditions. And their species are much more uplandy and ours are much more wet land, 2 separate words, because that site is very wet, their site is not very wet. So it's crucial, and we spent, good time figuring that out, because if you don't plant the right things, they're not going to be very happy. Thank you so much for coming. We invite you to look at our materials and maybe sign up if you're compelled to sign up for something. We'd love to see you again. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. You can reach me or any of us through the website. And thank you for coming.